A scary but true reality that we face is that 8 or 9 organizations of 10 fail to get the results they really should from initiatives to improve results in businesses and organizations of all type. And is it a case of, A, we're not smart enough to learn new techniques and methods, or would it be B, we need to get people to actually do it, right? Learn and do things differently in the future. And having asked this question of thousands of executives over the years, they would all agree it's definitely the latter as opposed to the former. More than 10 years ago, it kind of hit me between the eyes that there's a big problem in organizations where I train people on the technical skills to implement major performance improvement programs like Lean Six Sigma. Typically, these folks did just fine, but I noticed a pattern. Most of them struggled big time in running projects on their own. Even the projects I had running really well would grind to a halt after I handed them off to someone else. It hit me and came home to me that success in any major improvement initiative is at least an 80% people problem and not a technical problem. With more than 20,000 hours of experience in front of groups large and small, in every delivery setting and industry to make things happen, I realized it was my facilitation skills that really made the biggest difference. For the last 10 years, I've been developing and refining an inventory of some of those great facilitation techniques that I've learned and practiced and putting those into the coaching and the training that I use with my clients. But building into my development of experts and change agents, the necessary training, practice, and feedback they need to be much more effective in getting things done, particularly with groups of people, in person and online. I've been pleasantly surprised that a lot of the students, the majority actually, have rated that kind of learning as even more important than the technical skills like Lean Six Sigma. This brings us to the topic of this webinar, mastering facilitation skills for leaders online. This gets at what it takes to make all of us as leaders more effective in facilitating and leading virtual meetings and working sessions, which, whether we like it or not, is the number one way most of us have in order to plan, lead, and deliver results through working with people. Most of what I've learned about masterful facilitation, sometimes very painfully I might add, can in fact be leveraged in part or in whole in an online meeting forum. For the first time ever, I'm sharing this with you in a public forum. And my promise to you here is to do everything in my power here in the next 30 minutes or so to convey to you some gems of wisdom that you can use immediately to make a big difference in your performance. There's a lot at stake here. The fact is, the deck's really stacked against us to be successful in an online forum. I'm going to be sharing with you how we can tackle that. I'll also share with you the 3 things people hate most about online meetings, and a little glimpse at the 22 habits that the masterful online facilitator uses to get the best possible results. And then I'm going to teach you 3 specific techniques, powerful techniques that allow us to maintain focus, get the participation we require, and make sure that we get people really engaged with a technique called Enrolling Questions. Now, I'm going to make this a participative event for those of you who joined us for the live webinar, and I'm going to ask you to participate by using the question functionality. So you can raise your hand using the little hand icon, and I'll attempt to watch for that and unmute you if you've got a question as we go. But what I really want here is to have questions. So if you look at your panel, you're going to see a little thing that says Handouts. If you click on that now, and then where it says enter a question for staff, enter a question, I want you to type in the words "got it." I want you to do that right now. We want to practice this because we're going to ask several questions as we go through this webinar, and I want you to be quick about responding so that we can move quickly. So right now, please open up that little question thing and type in "got it." Now, I just want to see that from enough of you to know that this is working. Okay, they're coming through. Got it, got it, got it. Keep coming. You're doing good. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. That assures me of a couple of things. A, you can hear me just fine, and B, the technology is something you can handle. So I don't have a handout here. Maybe Kim will decide we want to upload one, but if we did have a handout, there's also a handout thing where you can grab something like this 22 habits of the top online facilitator and we will definitely do that if we have time here as going through the webinar. So let's move on now. Got a couple of questions. You know, what's at stake? Well, I saw some interesting research, and basically it's suggested that 67% of executives say meetings are a complete what? Well, if the W isn't for what? What could that word be? How about a complete waste of time? And interestingly enough, you know, I had the opportunity to do some training, some kind of Lean Six Sigma Green Belt training for a very large IT services organization that's part of a multi-billion-dollar retailer. And a whole gaggle of, you know, programmers and project managers and people who implement projects and manage people in a room. And we went off to do some brainstorming around what it is that really makes us crazy. And what was interesting is they went away and brainstormed and quickly came to the conclusion that the biggest source of waste that they encountered every day was, and it starts with an M, what would that be? Surprise, surprise, it was meetings. And in their case, you know, they're a globally dispersed organization, many different sites, people in different functional areas having to use online meetings and in-person meetings all the time, but they quickly kind of put their heads together and said, if there was just one thing that absolutely wasted their time and made them crazy, it was meetings. And that's not an outlier. 6, 7 times out of 10, when we bring people together that work a lot in forums with people and having to work in a multidisciplinary fashion, economically, or not economically, but geographically dispersed, quickly talk about meetings being a big headache. All right, so what's at stake? Well, one of the things that I think is really important is to recognize that there's several fatal flaws. And there's a pretty cool article in Forbes a while back you can go look up. But let's just talk about what some of those flaws are, right? So right off the bat, the deck is stacked against us because it's really hard for people to remember anything by just hearing the words. Without the visual cues we get in an online meeting, our brains just aren't wired to pick up things nearly as well as we have when we're face-to-face. We can hear the nuances, see the body language, and the emphasis. Next one is our attention spans are getting shorter. And according to this article, believe it or not, our attention spans have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter, as little as 10 minutes on average for adults. That brings up a pretty good question here. How long are most of your online meetings? Well, I've found that they run at least a half hour, if not an hour or even longer. Next up, we've got lacking those social cues. So according to this research, if we don't have those visible social cues of an in-person meeting, kind of indicates what's going on. I'm talking about us as a facilitator. We can be in big trouble, right? We don't get the visual feedback from our audience when we're facilitating, whether they're puzzled, they're lost, they're interested in what we're saying, or maybe just bored out of their skull. See these poor people banging their heads on the table? We can't see that they're sitting there with their heads in their laps going, oh my goodness, what are we trying to do here? Then we have the problem with misunderstandings. And when we kind of have this one-way communication without those social cues, we can have lots of issues with people not understanding, right? We could be sitting there and not really understand whether they're wrapped in agreement, right? They're really paying attention. Oh my, I can't wait for the next word. Or maybe they're sitting there with their mouths hanging open like, what did they just say? Or maybe they're just plain tuned out, right? They're multitasking, they're doing something else. And then finally, they can be really hard to bond, right? So it's around in virtual meetings, we really don't have that face-to-face interaction. Our senses aren't coming into play, you know, hearing and kind of that whole visual and the body language and all these other things. And this makes it much harder to get strong commitment and to build trust. So what I'd like you guys to do right now, just for fun, is we're going to do a quick poll using that questioning problem. Which of these 5 things, and all I'm looking for is the number, right? Just quickly think about which of these 5 things in your mind is probably the biggest fatal flaw of the online meeting. So I just want you to quickly open up the question thing and very quickly just type the number, just as fast as you can. Bang, 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 type the number, and I'm just going to read them back here. So we got 2, 3, 3, 3. Okay, we got a 4, a 3, a 3, a 1, a 3. The 3s are winning this horse race in a hurry. We've got a gaggle of 3s, some 2s, 1s, and 4s, but by far, number 3, lacking those visible social cues, is being kind of that biggest fatal flaw of the online meeting. So thank you so much for participating. And that was great feedback because I was kind of curious what you guys thought. All right, let's move on. So let's get at what are those 3 things that people hate the most about online meetings. Get a little drum roll going here. And number 1, boring presenters. Oh my goodness. Well, that would be who? That's probably us, the folks that are sitting in front of folks and actually leading the meeting and having all this conversation. So the number 1 thing is, oh, boring. How about number 2? Well, how about too much information? Well, my goodness. I don't suppose we'd be guilty of trying to pack 10 pounds of stuff on a 5-pound bag when it comes to information in our meetings, not us. And how about technology and the glitches with technology and, people late, can't make it work, can't hear them, dropping out, blah, blah, blah. So really quick here, how about you, right? So just really quickly use that question poll thing, but I'm looking for 2 things. The number, right? Which of these 3 things you hate the most, and if you like, what else do you hate, right? So quickly with the question tool, a number, which of these 3 that you hate the most, and is there something you want to add to the list? Please do that right now, and I'll try to keep up and give you some feedback here. All right, 2. A number, okay, 2, and not realistic for the meetings, okay, excellent, thank you. Poor meeting management, number 1, poor meeting management, not realistic. Keep going, don't stop, keep coming. Okay, number 2, ooh, stepping on each other while talking. Oh, that's a big one. That's a big one. People not listening, not engaged, number 1. Why is that? That's because we are boring. Wrong participants in the meeting. I love that one. We're going to talk more about that later when we get at what do you do about it. Number 1, it's too easy for the outside distractions, especially when somebody's being boring. Boring presentation. Deliverables not defined. Well, that's a good one. That's a very good one. Thank you. Not well timed. That's important. We're going to talk about timing and how we use that to manage energy in our online meetings. Poor communication skills of the presenter. Oh my goodness, that would be right in there with the boring part. Not having a clear agenda, not the right people in the meeting. I love it. No clear agenda. Able to multitask without getting caught. Oh, I love it. I'm going to give you a couple of techniques today that you can use to make sure that problem, maybe you can't eliminate it, but it's going to become very dangerous in your future meetings to try to get away with multitasking. Lacking the agenda. Too little interaction with the audience. Excellent, excellent. We're going to tackle that. Diminished interaction. And that's because of that lack of social feedback. Very important, very important. Thank you so much for those little tidbits and insights here as to what you're thinking. All right, so let's move on now. I'm going to give you some tips, right? Like how to stop being that boring presenter. And one of the techniques I'll talk a little bit more about later is what's called this change of state methodology. And this is a practical matter, if it's true, our attention span is at most 10 minutes, might be a lot less depending on who we are. We've got to do something on some kind of interval to reboot the energy in our room. Maybe a little activity or some kind of closeout and transition to this new topic. Maybe a question to make people think and then check in and have them answer the question, much like we just did here in our little practice session. The next one is we need to answer the venerable, then the honorable, what's in it for me, or the famous with-em question. And one of the things you've got to be careful about is never assume people in your meeting actually see this as particularly having value. Who's in the room? And why are they there? And if you don't happen to know why they're there, I would suggest very strongly that you just flat out ask, hey, hey, Bill, I see you're here. Why are you here? And why is this meeting important to you? That could be really important. So I'm going to cover some more on that later. The next one that's critical is everybody needs to have a role. They got to have an expectation. Maybe they don't know when it's coming, by the way. It was part of the trick here. And I'm going to cover that in a lot more detail later. And then there's this technique called enrolling questions. And I think you've already recognized that I've already started using that technique in just very few short minutes that we've been working in this webinar today. Let's move on now. Too much information. Whew. Well, first of all, commit to just not doing it. You know, less is more. So, you know, can I discuss 10 things in this meeting and get nothing done? Or can I limit this to 3 things and actually make something happen now? Well, I think the latter would definitely be more attractive in most cases. We need to be really prompt about starting and ending our meetings on time, and it's important for people to begin to realize that, because my experience has been if they know for a fact that this thing isn't running over, or we might get done early, this isn't going to be so much a waste of my time, I'm more likely to show up on time, and I'm more likely to engage. How about this next one? Never, ever, 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 you get the idea now, never do what? R and S. What would we never do? We would never read slides. Oh my goodness, probably the most boring thing you can possibly do. And it amazes me how many incredibly smart people I know fall into that little trap. Now, there's several techniques we can use as an alternative to that, and I'm going to share some of those here in a little bit. Boil that information down to the salient information that's specific around what we need to accomplish to make the decision or to make the point. You know, meetings shouldn't be about just where are we and checkbox, check, check, check. Meetings should really be about getting something done. You know, if it's just reporting status, you can do that with a project management tool or a summary memo or an email. You shouldn't be wasting time talking about status. You need to be focusing in on what are we doing to get back on track. So maybe it's just the yellow and the red items in our scorecard, not spend a whole lot of time on the green stuff. I like to use power summaries, and power summaries is a powerful technique because you may in fact have a lot of information that you're forced to share in your meeting, whether you like it or not, like financial reports, maybe it's stuff came from a supplier with a problem-solving activity, or maybe you've got 55 different things that need to be considered before we make the decision. But here's what I like to do. I like to have somebody boil that down, and I give an assignment. So you know what? Before we have the meeting, I'm going to ask 3 different people to put together a power summary of this information, and be prepared to do that in less than 90 seconds. There's 3 important benefits to using that type of technique called the power summary. Even better when you have somebody else do the summary, is it reduces the boredom by far because you get to shut up and let somebody else have a hand. Definitely increases the engagement and your involvement, and it will definitely create a change of state, right? It'll change the energy of what's going on here. It'll reboot that 10-minute attention span problem and get everybody back on track. And then finally we have the technology bugbear, and got a picture here of the bugbear on the side. Isn't he cute? Well, maybe not so much, but the big thing here is, you know, failing to plan is planning to what? Well, I think we've all heard that before. It's planning to fail. And one of the techniques that the Six Sigma crowd to recognize is failure mode and effect analysis, FMEA. And this is really thinking through what can go wrong and what can we do about that. So before I talk about this 3-pronged attack, you know, here's some ideas around those newbies, right? Let's just say you got people coming into your meeting online, but it's really kind of the first time. So there's some things you can do, right? You can have a separate little meeting just to kind of do a test run. Or maybe we encourage the newbies coming in the first time to arrive 5 minutes early. I mean, that puts pressure on you as the facilitator to be there, but get them in there, right? And let's just say you can't do that. Maybe if you're having a meeting, a big meeting, and you got lots of people coming in that haven't really done this with the technology, maybe you'd like to build in a little extra time in the agenda for the very first meeting when we bring people together, just to shake out some of those technology problems. Another thing that's so easy to do today with all the different tools available is to create a quick little YouTube video, or maybe something you can stick out on your internal network, right, with how to use that technology. Maybe you want to have a little quick frequently asked questions page for your newbies. Maybe you even put that in the backside of your agenda so that people have a quick place to go to solve some of their technology problems. Let's talk about that 3-pronged attack to killing the technology bugbear. You know, come up with at least 3 different mediums to hold your meeting and have all those connection details and backups noted in the agenda and ready to go. Just to be transparent, from my company, right, we use 4 different kinds of technologies to work with our global team and with our clients, depending on their technology and what they're able to do. These are specifically GoToMeeting, JoinMe, Skype, and the venerable phone landline, or just bridging people in on the call. For important meetings, I'll have 2 of these online screen sharing things running at the very start. That way, if I have an issue, like for example, people can't download the GoToMeeting, viewer, and it's giving them headaches with their browser, blah, 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 very quickly transition to JoinMe. Now, I like GoToMeeting because of certain features like video cam and some recording features and chat log and some other cool stuff. But jumping over to JoinMe and getting people re-engaged visually is well worth it if we're not making things happen. By having both of those tools open at the same time at the beginning of the meeting, I can toggle from one or the other in just a few seconds. Now, I'll tell you another little secret. I sometimes will have people in my meeting in GoToMeeting, for example, and other people through JoinMe at the same time. Now, I have to have a pretty good computer to do that, decent bandwidth, but you know what? It works. How about voice issues? If we're doing web conferencing, this can be greatly affected by internet connectivity and bandwidth, especially for people joining meetings from home, maybe from other countries. Having a little troubleshooting guide attached in your appendix is a really good idea. And if you can, I would highly recommend having somebody as your backup there, right? In other words, have somebody designated that could take troubleshooting offline with the participant, get on the phone with them and talk it through, help them get connected. You don't want to be doing that when you got a bunch of people sitting around twiddling their pencils, because they're going to what? They're going to check out, and they may even drop out. So maybe you can have somebody as your backup to handle that. Here's a critical one as well. Always, always, always provide your agenda electronically in soft copy in advance, usually by email, and ask them to have that open when the meeting starts. That way, if you're forced to drop back to using in that conference phone, we can at least refer to the agenda and be looking at the same agenda as we work through our meeting. Now, got a quiz question for you. I'd like you to scan this list. These are the 22 habits that, and it's by no means an all-inclusive list, but these are the top 22 habits that I would encourage anybody in an online forum to know and be able to master on the fly. I want you to scan this list, and here's the question. How many of these 22 things you think Ron has already put into play in the last 20 minutes? And if you quickly use that question tool and just plug a number, just the number only, plug a number. How many of these 22 do you think I've already put into play in this very short amount of time during this webinar? All right, the numbers coming in, 6, 12, 20. All right, keep coming, keep coming, keep them coming, 10. Got some good guesses coming in here. Good guesses, 8, okay, 12-ish, 12, 18. Okay, we got some very close guesses. Nobody's hit the number yet. 5. All right, awesome, awesome. A couple more. 7. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, awesome. So we've got a little sampling. Well, I have another little drum roll here. And I've actually put 16 of these into play. I grayed them out so you could quickly scan this. You may not know what these things are, and that's okay, right? And I've got a suggestion for you to learn all the rest of this stuff in the future, but we can't do in the webinar. But rolling questions, the visibly recorded objectives, and the learn by doing technique. For example, we got to practice that little questioning tool using the GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar tool, I mean, and so we got to learn it kind of on the fly. I'm trying to practice this less is more. Try not to read those doggone slides and so on. You can kind of look through this whole thing here very briefly. And I'm using some of these techniques which you may not know anything about, but they're definitely in play. So thank you for participating in that quick little activity. All right, so let's move on. I'm going to now give you some really solid coaching, and you can listen carefully. You can certainly be getting a copy of this recording to the webinar as well. But how about maintaining focus and attention? Well, the first thing is you got to do is pay attention to that 10-minute rule. Right? There's an attention span problem, and absolutely no less frequently than every 10 minutes, we need to do something for some kind of meaningful interaction or a change of state. Remember that change of state is when we actively shift our focus and the interaction from one thing to another, like maybe from listening to seeing something, or from seeing to doing something, or a different speaker, or a new topic, right? By doing this, we restart that 10-minute attention span clock. Create your agenda in such a fashion that pace is such that the participants, if they aren't paying attention, will get lost, right? So for those people multitasking or whatever, trying to do something else, they're going to learn really fast that if they do that, they're going to get left in the dust. How about those WIFMs, right? When you create your agenda, it's very wise to critically think about that what's in it for me question. When you prepare for that meeting, focus on what's important to the people you're expecting to be there, and the more personal you can make that, the better. And if you do that, it's going to be really hard for them to check out. This also suggests that you invited the right people to the meeting and they have a real reason to be there. I'd suggest you make a rule here that everybody's required to participate for the meeting to be successful, and find a way to get them involved. If you can't check that box for everybody that you're going to invite, you better rethink who's invited or find some other method to keep everybody mentally engaged. Get some work done here, right? So one great technique I've used for people who don't have a role or not likely to be very engaged or to listen carefully is to require them to give a report out at the end of the meeting. Now I can't check out because I'm going to be expected to report on what just happened. This could be their feedback as appropriate, like, what are the 3 most important things we accomplished today? Or, please give us 3 ideas we can use to make this a more productive meeting next time. Or, what are 3 things that are most important to do before our next meeting? Please tell us what we just signed up for. I would tell you to be creative. Find ways to get things going here, generate questions, recaps, and the like. Technique number 2, ensuring full participation. To help ensure that full participation, there's a number of techniques. I already shared several, right? But here's some additional ones. There's that whole enrolling questions technique that I already shared. And I'm going to tell more about that in a couple of minutes. If you send out materials in advance, call on people at random to talk about certain parts of the pre-meeting materials, right? So, hey, we're going to get into this. Bill, tell me more about the preparation that went into that. Well, Bill didn't expect that coming. And Bill's going to feel pretty bad if we go, Bill, hello, Bill, where are you? That could get interesting. People are going to figure that out, right? Get them to weigh in on things like, is it still current? Is that information still accurate? Is it still important and relevant to what we're trying to accomplish? What else, Bill, should we be considering as we get into this decision? How about designing your meeting for that pause every 10 minutes or so and getting people at random to comment about something? Or if you're using a web conferencing tool like we are here, ask them to use chat or that questioning functionality, submit answers to quick questions. Maybe you're posing something, you ask people to use that chat or the question tool to record their questions, thoughts, or information that they may want to contribute. And then when you get to the end of your phase, you can pause, very quickly go look at that and say, okay, here's all the things people brought up. What this does for us is it speeds things up later to get everybody to weigh in, and it gives you the license to engage in more discussion on the key points. Using these kinds of tools, we can take quick yes-no polls or answer short closed-end questions like ranking numbers and lots of other stuff. Here's a tip. The more random in time and who's called on, the better. No one wants to admit they're not paying attention and not being able to be part of the team and do what you've asked. And then we have technique number 3. How to use those enrolling questions. So, what's an enrolling question? Well, usually it's a question or questions that require a response of yes or no. It's a tremendous way to get people hooked into what you're doing and engage at the very onset of the meeting. You might have noticed I used that technique. And it helps you establish control, right? Use pertinent questions that are close-ended and make sure there's a physical and a mental activity. They got to think about it, and then they need to do something about it physically, and that's what I like about using this online function. In an online forum, make them reply verbally if you can't use this texting thing or whatever. Maybe you have texting or raising hand tools like we have in GoToWebinar. Insist on 100% participation. Here's some of my favorites that you can modify as these kinds of questions, like how many agree that X is an issue we must address? Follow that with how many would say no. Here's the magic, gang. Look for 100%. So if there's 10 people there and only 3 people weigh in, you say, come on, you got to play along here. How many agree this is important? We need to address it. And how many would say no? Give me an answer. Don't back off on that. How about this one? How many of you are frustrated by this? And who's okay with that? Get them to weigh in. Or who here thinks we should not do something about this versus who thinks we should? Okay, so I think you'll find those tips pretty helpful. Now, I'm going to ask you to weigh in here. Here's the question. I'm just looking for a letter Y or a letter N, right? Who agrees that these methods have to integrate, be used together to get the full impact? Okay, just want a Y or an N. Whether you agree or disagree, they have to integrate. Okay, I'm looking here. I'm looking for a lot of Ys. So far, I'm getting a lot of Ys. You guys are not disappointing me. Good job. Yeah. Got all kinds of, Okay, awesome. So you got the point. I didn't want to have to belabor that, but I wanted to check in to see if what I hoped for actually happened. So thank you for validating that we got the job done. Yeah, I've got some news for you. I'm actually going to be headed to Chicago here in February. We're launching a multinational marketing campaign in conjunction with the American or Apex organization in Chicago. And they're at their headquarters, which is in Rosemont. It's not too far from O'Hare International. We're going to do a 2-day immersion program to develop really, really good facilitation and presentation skills. And frankly, very little of what we've done in this 4 hours is covered in a great deal of detail in this program. You think about a top facilitator in really difficult situations like leading Lean Six Sigma projects or major change initiatives or rolling out all new applications and the like. Doing training for very difficult skills all come into play. And to be a really effective facilitator, to a degree, you've got to come to the party with good technical skills. For example, business process improvement expertise or supply chain or implementing systems or IT or project management, whatever it may be. And to be an effective facilitator, you've got to come to the party with a certain degree of technical prowess and some credibility to kind of earn the right to be in front of your group. But then you also need to be conversant with and familiar with the organizational aspects of the organization you're going to work with, right? So, you know, what's the culture of this organization? How do they get things done? What are their tribal best practices? You know, what are their methods they're already good at for rolling out or making something happen? It's very important that you're conversant with that so you can work within the framework and the context of what the organization already does. But then the biggest focus of this 2-day program is to make you drop dead good at getting in front of a group in a live forum and by association an online forum and be just flat dead good at leading what's going on. And there's actually a 33 habits master list, these same 22 we have here, but they're expanded with additional techniques that we can build out in a 2-day program. There's actually 21 practice labs that you have to master during the 2 days. So the audience gets broken into groups of 7, 6 or 7 people per group, and every single person has 3 practice facilitations over the course of the 2 days, whereafter you get direct feedback from your team, the people seeing you in action, from the instructors, and it's brutal. It is just flat brutal, and we are going to run folks through the ringer of all the situations, scenarios that we run up against, and trust me, you're going to walk out of there way more effective immediately in getting in front of groups and being an effective presenter. So watch your inbox. We're going to have the formal, there'll be a web link for early registration, I think next week, Tuesday on the 22nd. Keep your eyes open for that showing up in your inbox, and we'd love to see you there if you could make that happen, or if there's others in your organization that you think would benefit from this level of skill of absolutely being a dynamite presenter and able to really use superior leadership and change management skills in driving effective change and improvement within organizations. And then if you haven't already done it, you can always enroll in our MetaOps magazine. This is an online anthology publication, and lots of smart people come together to provide their best stuff. And if you haven't already signed up, when you do, you can download one of my free ebooks, The 5 Hidden Ways That Cost Your Organization $100,000 a year or more, and how you can quickly attack those. That's at www.metaopsmagazine.com. So there you have it. We've learned what's at stake and how that deck is stacked against us. Those 3 things that people hate the most and what we can do about it to not be guilty of those 3 things. Introduce this notion of the 22 habits, and then 3 habits I've drilled into here to really help you get good at least right now, right out of the box, tomorrow, today even, in your next meeting, how you can do these things much more masterfully. So with that, we're past the time I promised. I don't want to keep this down to about 30 minutes, and we're slightly over that. But I will entertain any quick questions. If anybody might have one, this would be a time to raise a hand or to pose a quick question.
We do have 2 hands raised.
Okay, great. So I'm going to unmute. Don't know which of you this is because we didn't have the name function working here. So I just unmuted both of you. You have a hand up. Would you like to ask a question? All right, not hearing anything, so we will put them back on mute, and I'm going to check questions really quick. All right, and people saying thank you, gotta go. Yep, that's cool, awesome. So I want to again thank you so much for your time and energy to be here today, to join me for this. I hope you got some useful ideas that will help you make a real difference online immediately. So with that, wishing you the very best of success.